Welcome to the WTR Small-Cap Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. Today we're joined by Aubrey Amatelli, founder and CEO at privately held PayRio. PayRio builds compliant digital payment solutions for cannabis and alternative medicine. Its flagship digital debit enables card-based purchases while reducing cash handling and replacing legacy cashless ATM methods with an emphasis on regulatory compliance and banking workflows. Also joining me is my WTR colleague, James Kisner. Aubrey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim and James.
And thanks for joining, James. So, Aubrey, you launched PayRio in 2022 after a decade at JP Morgan. What problems did you see in the market that inspired you to start the company?
Oh, well, cannabis being a federally illegal product, they actually, the industry hasn't been able to accept payments normally. So the way that the coffee shop, the grocery store, the way that we're all used to just tapping our card, inserting our card, the cannabis industry has never been able to do that. So it was definitely a challenge and a puzzle to be able to find payment solutions that can support the industry. And that was something I was really interested in doing and supporting.
Great. And also, you have a very interesting background. Do you mind giving our listeners just a 30,000-foot overview of your background, please?
Yeah, so I started my career in the Silicon Valley at a startup that was purchased by JP Morgan. So at that time, I had no idea what happened, but in that millisecond between where you swiped your card and you got that approval. Now I live and breathe that millisecond and that technology in between. So JP Morgan purchased that startup and I was folded into payments and I was at the big bank, the largest credit card processor in the world for over a decade. Learned everything I needed to know about payments. I always say it was the Harvard of education and payments there at JP Morgan. I left to be the chief revenue officer at a fintech because I always wanted to get back into that, into the startup world growing up in the Silicon Valley. I was there for about a year and I realized I had just such a wide array of knowledge of payments and I was almost ready at that time to start my own business. So that's how PayRio was born. I was ready to support the cannabis industry growing up in California. I've been involved in that industry as well. And so it was a kind of a marriage between my love for payments and my wanting to support alternative medicines and growing that industry.
Very cool background. With that, I'll turn it over to James to ask a few questions.
All right, thanks, Tim. So Aubrey, as you said, PayRio focuses exclusively on cannabis and alternative medicine. So, how does that focus change the payment experience for your customers?
Yeah, so we started out actually, believe it or not, it's CBD. So initially, when I launched PayRio, I saw there was a need for CBD payment processing. It's considered really high, it's still considered high risk in the payment industry. But very quickly, the CBD customers that we were talking to said, "Hey, we have a solution here, but our dispensary, our cannabis dispensary, needs credit card processing." And so we pivoted over to support cannabis, and that's really where we got our name. PayRio could offer dispensaries the opportunity to accept credit cards, which at that time, 3 years ago, was really unheard of. We found a really great wallet-based solution that was secure and compliant and could support the dispensaries. Since then, we've really, my business model has really been to listen to the market. What does the market need? So psilocybin spores, cannabis clones, most recently peptides has been a really, big industry that we've been supporting. So we're always listening to what the market needs, and our unique payment solutions can support those industries that, Visa and MasterCard don't deem as, don't allow to process payments through their rails. And so when peptides are regulated by the payment brands, all of a sudden they don't know where to go. Well, we have a solution that we've been using in cannabis or other alternative medicines that fits that industry really well. So we pivot towards what the market needs, and as long as we're in the alternative medicine space, so very high risk, but helping that specific industry.
I mean, for those who don't know, can you briefly explain what a peptide is?
So peptides, the biggest one you'll probably hear is like a GLP-1 or Ozempic is kind of a one that's been growing really lately, but creatine is a peptide, I think. but they've been recently regulated by the FDA. And so right now to sell peptides online, it has to be B2B or for research purposes only, where prior about a year and a half ago, you as a consumer could go online and purchase peptides in a B2C manner. And so now those websites who used to sell B2C don't have payment opportunities unless they work with companies like PayRio. So it's been really interesting.
Could use some of those peptides, I think. They're putting on
Yeah.
some weight in the research seat. So you recently were named the #1 best cannabis company to work for. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
What drives PayRio's culture and makes it unique?
Ooh, so one of the main reasons I started PayRio that started that I worked at in between JP Morgan starting PayRio, I was the only female in the entire C-suite and board. And it was a wonderful opportunity. I was super proud to have that seat, but it was also something that company in particular wasn't willing to change. They wanted to keep, they didn't want to expand their female leadership within the company over the year that I was there. And so one of the biggest reasons, that I started PayRio was I wanted to, one, inspire other women to know that they could do it too, that they could start a company too, but also I had the ability to now hire women as leaders and hire stay-at-home moms who can contribute to their family while their kids are at school. And so PayRio is really an extension of me and my family. I have, my extended family, if that means in my network. So I have, two of my best friends from high school who are stay-at-home moms that get to work and support our company when their kids are at school. One of my closest friends from college, she's my VP of sales now. My second employee, Chase, who your team has met through the process of getting to this, he was my neighbor growing up and colleagues from JP Morgan. And so, the culture really is keeping, it's really people that I trust and the network and that extended network and just treating everyone with respect and so far so good. Everyone's happy.
I think it's a good segue to our next question. I think the stat is so accurate that your team is now over 50% women and 100% female executive team, if that's still right.
Yeah.
I believe you said that you went to bring feminine energy to the technology payment space, and
Yes.
I guess it sounds like that was an intentional thing from the beginning. But what does that really mean to bring feminine energy to the payments fintech space, and how does it really look like in practice at PayRio?
Just check out our website, payrio.com. But no, payments isn't very exciting, right? And payments, I feel like you think it's old and archaic and who wants to go and call a payment company and talk to them, right? And so when I entered the market, I had the opportunity as the CEO and the head of marketing and wearing all the hats to change that. So I wanted to make it a very approachable brand. And I wanted to make sure that everyone could, our customers and our community could easily get a hold of me. So even today, you could go on our website and book a meeting directly with me. But it's we're having fun with the branding. We have bright pinks and bright blues when we go to events. We wear these really fun, hats. So everyone knows the PayRio team is always wearing a hat in pink and blue. But I wanted to be approachable payment company, to be a fun payment company. So these brands, especially in cannabis, who don't really know payments and haven't had the opportunity for normalized payments, to not be afraid to reach out and ask and learn about payments or the options that they have, because being stuck with cash is also very dangerous. A lot of the dispensaries get broken into and it's that's why we see security guards in front of all the dispensaries. So it's dangerous to be a cash only business these days. And we're helping reduce the cash on hand. And I don't want the alternative medicine industries to be afraid of payments. So that's how we're bringing the feminine energy, the fun, exciting feminine energy to cannabis and alternative medicines.
Makes sense. So I think this, you partially answered this next question, but maybe double click a little bit. So your flagship product is called Digital Debit. How does that work? Why is it a better option than cash or older cashless ATM methods?
Yeah, so the digital debit is through the good old terminal, which we see at dispensaries. But cashless ATM is essentially both of these solutions run along the ATM rails. So we aren't going through the Visa and MasterCard rails, which keeps our customers compliant and safe. But typically, the solutions, the cashless ATM solutions require the bud tender at the dispensary to give cash back to the consumer on every transaction because it has to round to a 5 or a 10. And so the consumer is always confused. We don't go to a grocery store and pay with our card and get cash back in our hand unless we ask, for the cash back, right? And so when a consumer is getting, $2.30 in their hand, they're wondering why. Well, our digital debit solution takes that change and digitally transforms it into a tip. So now a consumer can take that $2.30, for example, and on the screen of the terminal, choose to tip the bud tender that change. And so it makes it a change-free transaction. And so that's one of the benefits of our digital debit solution, along with tapping the card to pay, which other cashless ATMs don't have. But what we're doing is we're reducing the amount of cash that the dispensaries have to have on hand by not requiring them to give cash back on every transaction, but actually taking that cash back and digitally transforming it into a tipping option for consumers.
That sounds like a real value add. PayRio, I think we've alluded to this, has expanded to psilocybin, peptides, and also ketamine. What's driving that move into broader alternative medicine?
So it's really based on the market needs and also just based on, curiosity. Myself, I've found ketamine therapy has been life-changing for me. And so it's, seeing the life-changing value that it had for me, I wanted to make sure that I could support that industry and payments because I knew how hard it was for me to go through, the therapist and book the room and go through the pharmacy and make the payment, right? And so I knew that there was a need there. Let me help and make that easier for the next individual to experience that therapy, that life-changing therapy. So it's a mixture of me exploring the alternative medicine space and seeing how amazing it is and how it's changed my life and it can change lives, but also listening to what the market needs and where it's going. And psilocybin is where a lot of the cannabis growers and farmers, they love cannabis, but now we're seeing a shift into psilocybin. And so that's where we're shifting into finding solutions that can support that industry as well.
That makes sense. So I think everyone knows that cannabis still to this day remains federally illegal, despite widespread state adoption. I think more than half of our citizens are living in states that have legal cannabis. But how are payments and banking evolving under that patchwork of regulations?
So I always like to talk about, Visa and MasterCard as a payment company are our governing body, right? Just like, the federal government states that cannabis is federally illegal. And so Visa and MasterCard are always going to side with what the federal government says, right? So if the federal government says cannabis is federally illegal, Visa and MasterCard are going to say, this is something that we will not, support in the process of payment. So we're always following as a payment company what the federal government says and their rules and regulations. And that goes for cannabis, but it also goes for, CBD. So CBD is still considered high risk. THCA is a form of cannabis that is still allowed to, you can process payments through the Visa and MasterCard rails, but it's highly regulated. So we also have to be up to date on what states our customers can sell or send CBD to, et cetera. So we're always tracking what the federal government ruling is on a state by state basis. And that's where, where we're able to, that's how we support our customers based on those rulings. So we're really one step behind and following that. And that's how we operate.
Sounds kind of complex.
Very.
So you've previously said that PayRio grew profitably early and without outside venture funding. Is that still accurate as of 2025? And how do you balance growth with financial discipline?
It is still accurate. And it was something that I started out, the company where we were, my staff was 1099 sales only, and I did all of the operations and everything else, right? And so I was able to tie ROI very easily and give my team a very high commission, right? They worked hard and they got paid really well, and they still do. But that way I knew that, we could take that, the revenue, from the sales and recycle that back into the company. But our operational expenses have always been, very low for that reason. From a marketing standpoint, we've grown organically, right? That's our goal. We don't spend a ton of money on marketing. We're very involved in the community, lots of volunteer work, and that's how we spread the word. So it's been a grassroots project or grassroots company from the start. And that's how we've stayed profitable, is we've kept our expenses low.
As an analyst, we love to hear about discipline. Some people care about the dollar these days still and holding on to it. So what's next for PayRio? New products, markets, or shifts that you're watching in the regulatory landscape?
So PayRio has opened at the end of last year. We have opened a sub entity that is all low to medium risk, so supporting the federally legal industries. And that is just ultimately where we are able to shift, a lot of our business over to this sub entity, so that that entity is able to really focus in and grow on the high risk but federally legal products. So, that includes CBD, but we're also expanding to B2B and automotive law and accounting. And so that's been a focus of ours, because the cannabis side of the business is amazing. It's our bread and butter. We love this industry, but there is an end in sight in terms of, once cannabis becomes federally legal, all of the other payment brands or all the other processors and our largest competitors in the market, right, are going to be able to process payments. All of the largest point of sale systems are going to be able to integrate those payments. And so PayRio won't have as a unique of a value add to the industry as we do today. And so that's kind of what's new for us, is just starting to tippy toe into, this sub entity of ours and gaining traction there, while really putting the majority of our focus in on PayRio, but expanding in another direction as well.
Okay, that's very interesting. Ironically, legalization is bad for you.
But I want it.
Yeah,
So
that's
we
got
got
to
to
be
prepare
very
just
two
in
minds
case.
on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So on the policy side, as part of the NCIA's Banking and Financial Services Committee, what key policy discussions are happening now?
So the one that keeps popping up is the Safer Banking Act. And that act is just going to ultimately allow banks to feel, safer, more confident to support the cannabis industry. It's also going to decrease the amount of taxes that the dispensaries have to pay. Right now, the cannabis market really struggles. They're paying 30 to 40% taxes. And so it's very hard to become a profitable company when you're already paying that amount of taxes, right? How do you become profitable? So the industry is really struggling. So the Safer Banking Act is something that we're talking about a lot. Also decriminalizing cannabis. So going from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, how does that affect the finance part, finance or the banking, or in terms of the payments? So the Safer Banking Act won't really affect the payment side of the house, because it still isn't changing how the federal government views cannabis. If cannabis goes to a Schedule 3, just like Advil, equivalent to that, it might change the payment world for us as well, because we can support the payment of Advil through a pharmacy, right? And so our world might change quicker than I actually anticipated if cannabis does get descheduled. So
Okay, great. And last one, finally, for dispensaries that are still operating cash only, what should they know about PayRio, and how can they get started?
Yeah, so if they're operating cash only, there's a great opportunity to increase your average order value. That's that's something we actually have a local dispensary come to us for a case study. But very quickly, you can boost your average ticket over 30% just by offering credit or a debit card solution or digital debit. But it also helps reduce the cash on hand, keeps the dispensary safe, and helps grow their overall revenue, and gives your customers more payment options, which all of us are carrying cards these days and love to tap that card and brings them into that next phase of their business growth. But so they can find us at payrio.com. And as I mentioned earlier, book a meeting directly with me. Happy to talk to the operators. I've talked to every single operator that works with PayRio. I love being part of the community and making sure they know that we're here to support them from start to finish. So
Awesome. Thanks, Aubrey. And I'm going to pass it back to Tim.
Great. Well, thanks, Aubrey and James, for joining me today to discuss PayRio's payment system for cannabis and alternative medicines. A very, very intriguing business model, I got to say.
thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, industry-specific symposiums, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small-Cap Spotlight podcast. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick.